This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Let's do it. My guest today is Nova Chrono. Nova Chrono, we'll call him Nova. Nova is a pseudonymous researcher and co-founder of Silent Research Labs, building a couple of products. One of them is called Stripchain, an intent-based interoperability protocol, making chain abstraction a reality. We'll learn all about this today. Welcome to the show, Nova.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you here. We'll do what we do at the beginning of the show. Mr. Nova, it'd be super cool if you could please introduce yourself. Love to just hear some of your background, what you've been doing in the lead up to co-founding Silent Research Labs.
Amazing, yeah. Initially, I started my days as a systems engineer at tech corporates, like places, enterprises, and we were building medical softwares essentially. Well, and in my phase, I was diving into cryptography to essentially come up with privacy preserving data layer for these medical softwares that we were creating back in 2017. I'm speaking, and that essentially led me to meet my co-founder Isa, and we ended up essentially creating Silent Research Labs because we saw that there was this problem that existed in privacy space and in protocols and systems in general. That was the problem of shared states, and we ended up kind of like building like protocols to overcome that issue over the next 2 years in Silent Research Labs. While coming to the conclusion that this problem of shared states, which is basically like if you preserve or use encryption as a mechanism to build a system architecture, you kind of restrict yourself to that domain. And this exact problem was replicable across many vertices throughout the entire stack. And this was very much there in blockchains itself. Like, how do we kind of like have a shared state system, like enabling the processing of multiple different like state changes across multiple systems. And this problem at scale became so much like intriguing, like in some sort of sense, that we ended up building Stripchain, and we ended up like going through a couple of like iterations, coming to the conclusion of what Stripchain as it is today. I'm very excited to kind of like dive more deeper into what precluded like the rationalization of the design system that we came up with and how we kind of like took it forward from there. So yeah, thank you so much, Andy.
All right. Fantastic. Well, let's just dive into it then, Nova. So to begin with, it'd probably be useful just to explain at a top level, high level, what is Stripchain trying to achieve? I guess you've talked about that a little bit, but yeah, just define, I guess, the vision. What is Stripchain trying to achieve?
So Stripchain is essentially, if you would formally want to define Stripchain, it's a unified execution layer and a communication protocol to create omni-chain applications. And omni-chain applications, by definition, what we want to essentially build or create is a mechanism through which developers, instead of interacting with a contract on a particular blockchain while basically designing their applications, they would rather interact with a series of contracts if they would want to do so, and interact with a generalized interface, let's say, instead of directly with a blockchain. And this is what we are calling an omnichain application that would enable developers to create what we call hyper interoperable applications at the end of the day. And this is like a new paradigm of development. So instead of like I said, instead of building or subscribing to a particular like system or a set of definitions, we want to essentially create composable, multi-structured, abstracted designs and experiences, both for the developers and of course and obviously for the end user. So that is what Stripchain is at a high level, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Be also good to understand a little bit about how the idea of building Stripchain came together originally. What's the origin story, Nova?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, like we were working with trying to find out how to have like shared state in private system. That was we were working at Silent Research Labs before, back in 2022, throughout like 2021, 2022. And when we saw that, like we had to figure out how to have shared states in order to have more inclusive experiences in general, like not just for like while if you want to build in privacy, but rather if you would also want to make it more generalized. And we obviously dived a lot deeper into like the interoperability spectrum and space that we have till to this date. Like we a lot of the design philosophies and rationales have really like pointed and gunned towards having this idea of message passing and general message passing. And if you would want to have a broader like definition of what it is, it's like, and or a simpler definition of what it is rather, like if you would think that like we have continents all across the earth and on the crust, and we have countries built on top of it. We have mechanisms as of right now to kind of like create, like essentially have borders, to essentially have gates in these borders of different countries defined within a continent. However, we actually don't have the mechanism to have two different continents communicate with one another. And this continents over here would essentially mean like a homogeneous, like let's say a shared state that basically like shares the homogeneous VM structure, right? Like let's say a bunch of protocols or systems, distributed systems that is built on top of EVM could essentially communicate with one another very seamlessly through the use of, let's say, general message passing protocols. That's the current structure, and what we are used to as of this moment. All have we have built different like iterations of this model till now. One of the common approaches is basically using like a oracle and a relay to kind of like pass the block header to kind of like synchronize the states between two of these like countries. But in general, like we have, as of this moment, different continents. You can think of them as like clusters of VMs, like different protocols or systems, blockchains, subscribe to the same protocols, but we don't have something that connects these two different continents and connects all these different like countries even within these continents in a lot more generalized format. And that's exactly what we want to build. Like we want to become the mantle rather than like having to build bridges on top of these, like on top of the crust. We want to become the mantle to kind of like create and have like a shared space in general. And the idea of the reason why I would want that is basically, right now as a user, you obviously will subscribe to a camp. You will subscribe to, and by camp I mean like let's say a chain, and you will, let's say, use X number of applications within that chain, but your preference at times, oftentimes, is precluded based on what camp you want to get subscribed to. And this exactly is not the right approach, I would say, to kind of like for developers to attract users and for users to even like go and use applications. We should not, in an ideal world, in an ideal state, we should not exactly like think about which camp we want to subscribe to, because most of this like iterated like camps try to just have the same state philosophies of which is like the becoming the ledger of honesty, but instead it while they want to make it more efficient, like minuscule improvement of efficiency. But we do not need to fight over these like branches, and we need to abstract all of it away. And for the end user, and for also for the developer, they shouldn't need to like be subscribed to let's say a state space in order to create that flow and the user experience at the end of the day. So that's, I would say, like what led us to creating this building Stripchain, which is a unified execution layer, is one of it. It's a unified execution, like connecting every system state and every of these like blockchains out there, uh no matter which what VM it is running, and what contract, like what language it is using.
Yeah.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Okay, got it, got it. Thank you. Look, you've used a couple of terms, Nova, like state chain and, of course, omni-chain world. So, be useful to understand, how we think about this. So, what does that mean? How do you look at and define state chain in an omni-chain world?
Okay, a state chain would be a state space. A state chain would be a blockchain that is using, or a group of blockchains, let's say, that can have a seamless communication enabled within one another, right? Or it could be a single blockchain as well, however you want to look at it. However, an omnichain in this case would be a system that could have a spanned state, that could have multiple of these interactions with multiple of this ledgers in atomically or in an asynchronous manner enabled within itself to kind of like create like like a lot more inclusive experience, if that makes it clear.
Yep, got it. Thank you. All right, let's talk about, I guess, the design of Stripchain then, Nova. So maybe talk us through some of the most common, like intent solver design patterns, and then how you approach the design of Stripchain.
Uh, that 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 that's an excellent question. Like, so the way we kind of like approached strip chain is that first we had to kind of like define what is a state in general in application, right? Like a state is essentially move from A to B. And in case of like, let's say, linear monolithic applications, it's often kind of like subdued to within a closed space and a closed spectrum. However, if you want to kind of like define a state change on the context of an omnichain application, like you asked me, it would have multiple distributed ledgers syncing with one another to kind of like complete that state hop. And it would, if you would imagine like a graph, uh it would mean progression on the x-axis rather than on the y-axis. So oftentimes when you would build like these linear monolithic structures, it's often like having a ping pong between the y-axis to kind of like complete a state change. However, if you would want to create an ideal omni-chain application that could comprise multiple like iterations, it would often have a change of access, right? And that's something that is important to identify and understand. What that signifies is that we need a machine that could essentially have all these different states of all these different systems synced with it, so that it could provide the interface to define, so that we could define the state change on it, rather than having to kind of like sparse around trying to figure out how to define the proper move or the execution trace that we want to kind of like enable. And the current model of general message passing as structured, like while if we want to create something as an interchain application using something like that, it's oftentimes that our contracts are horizontally divided between two ledgers, and it's basically just linked with a, like I said, with the analogy of a border, like between countries, like it's often linked with a channel, and two of these contracts communicate with one another. And however, we want to kind of like imagine a world where it's more vertically stacked up, different chains of different contracts, essentially compressed down to kind of like linearly executed over time. And it's more of like a declarative model, if you would imagine, or more of like you would say like, and that this is where like two concepts may clash upon now, is that like the movement of a state change, the way we would want to define it while building these omni-chain systems, can also be like drawn parallel with something called as the intent-based design architectures, or the declarative paradigm, right? Where in a declarative paradigm, you would like in preferable terms say that, hey, I want this, and this has to be executed over this runtime. And this is what both of these models kind of like converge to at the same time, the concept of like linear development while making vertical progress and horizontal progress at the same time across different modules and different stacks in the ecosystem. One of the design primitives to enable all of this like ideas that I'm talking about was that like one of the common approaches is to bake an idea of simply enabling that state change in the most simplest format. And that is what exactly Stripchain does with its StripVM. StripVM is and now I'm getting a bit more technical into the architecture of Stripchain, but I'll just keep it high level, at least in the beginning of the conversation. StripVM is essentially the unified execution. It acts as the shared state and shared space syncing with all these different blockchains. And we could essentially input a state initiation into it. And we have created a format or a message format called strip intents, through which you can define what you want to achieve. And StripVM will essentially take care of which chains and what applications and what functions and what contracts you want to interact with and give you the resulting output. So this is the model of design that we have adopted for Stripchain. And if you would want to, let's say, compare it with a intent-based declarative paradigm, yes, I would definitely say that it is 100% comparable to having like a intent-based system or a resulting output, right? And yeah, if you would want me to dive into like different kinds of like uh design philosophies that we came to a conclusion to how we designed this kind of like interaction, I will be happy to dive more into it as well.
Well, I almost hesitate to ask Nova, but I did have it in my notes. You know, what is Stripchain at a bit more technical level? But we've already been reasonably technical. Although you did say that you would be happy to go even more technical. So, look, anything else that you want to say in terms of, you know, the technical stuff for technical listeners, please do feel free. Go for gold.
Yeah, like in general, up until now, I'd love to I'd be happy to summarize the fact that like yes, Stripchain could in an abstracted manner could be thought of as an execution engine, right? That basically parses different format, like different orders that comes into it. And orders over here, we enable developers to build it with the help of strip intents. So they could essentially input or essentially like create a strip intent, which could essentially signify a state change, and that state change could have multiple transgressions of like of different types, and that could be processed within StripVM. And the way it is designed is that it utilizes like a general purpose solver market or a network rather to kind of like execute on it to end or process all the traces back to the user and the application, more generally speaking, at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah, got it. Thank you, Nova. Also, Strip.io. Please explain Strip.io, because I know that's an important part of Stripchain.
Yes, excellent, Andy. Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. So Stripchain is essentially like can be broken down into the unified execution layer, which is the StripVM, and the strip intents basically can mark the execution trace of a flow. And Strip.io is one of the integral components that provides credible commitments to all these like orders and flows coming in the form of strip intents into StripVM, while the validators of StripVM validates for it. Right. And one of the main important purpose of Strip.io is that it helps us create a multi-chain or an interchain world. Okay, I'll go into a little bit of backstory while explaining like why Strip.io actually plays a very important role and part in the system itself. But in general, like StripIO in our current architecture of Stripchain helps provide credible commitment to and validates the execution flow that comes into StripVM. It acts from a user-facing side. It basically acts as the unified account that enables chain abstraction for users. Like it provides in simple terms like one address to represent like multiple identities on multiple chains, and essentially the user can control different identities through that single identity like hash that creates through that StripIO set of nodes essentially.
Yep.
But yeah, I would love to explain a little bit about like how why StripIO plays an important role. And going back, like one of the reasons why we started this entire journey was to come to a better design for or to invent better design for end application design, right? And intents became like is a declarative paradigm that often can converge with an interchain and omnichain experience in a world. And one of the first iterations that were playing out back in 2023 was a smart contract based design architecture where we would essentially define an intent. We structured and format or an intent in the smart contract and classified and divided that input in multiple operations. And it would be, you could draw this architecture down and you would see that all these operations that would go into the system would basically get fragmentized into multiple different mempools. And these mempools will have different categories, right? This was one of the earlier designs, and these mempools would essentially be a private marketplace which different solvers could compete to satisfy that mother intent, let's say. And this would be that mother intent that gets fragmentized into all these like sub intents, which this is one of the earlier designs, and we obviously ended up using one of the general message passing protocols back then to carry this operation forward in other blockchains as well, but EVM compatible blockchains, right? Because we couldn't actually carry or send a state forward or have the concept of a state forwarder enabled into it on the context of a multi-chain world. And this design essentially had taught us like two or essentially taught us two main like lessons. Like one of them that we could take out from that was that, well, if in a model where we would like divide an operation into multiple different fragments so that it gets processed, or one single operation into multiple different fragments, and we would have competition. One of the first conclusion was that, well, it's not that expressive in nature. The solver market in general solver design space is quite restricted to, let's say, bridging, swapping, and maybe certain another defined logic trace that you could say. So this was quite like restraining in some sort of sense for end application designers to essentially input such an artifact into the system. And second, of course, was that, well, we cannot actually communicate. And communicate is a big highlighted bold word with other chains at all. Like, how do we even like make sure the system remains decentralized, trustless, censorship resistance, and all the philosophical traits that we want to gun for while building a distributed system? In practice, if we would want another chain that is not compatible with the user's main locale to have an output received on the user's end. And we came up with the conclusion that, well, we need a set of cluster of nodes, let's say, and if that cluster of nodes could provide this in a non-custodial manner and becomes the mirror or the state forwarder into different chains while creating and maintaining this identity, this will help the whole process. So we moved basically, this is the current model of Stripchain. Like we moved away from a smart contract based design into like a unified execution engine or a layer itself that would process and through the help of StripIO can carry forward the state amongst multiple different systems while performing the execution trace initially defined by the developer. And yeah, it helps us kind of like create much more conclusive, much more unified experiences for the user, and has a lot more impact while creating results. Yeah. So I'd love, if I have your permission, I'd love to first, do you have any questions on this?
No, Nova. It's fun actually just to have a more technical podcast and let you explain the nuances of what you guys are building. So no questions from me. What did you want to explain though, Nova?
Yeah, one of the main things that we picked up from that is that, like, the way we think about solvers, like in today's world, solvers are mostly about like competing for orders, right? Like, it helps create tangible results for initiation of a state. And what what we, as of right now, we identified and we kind of like encouraged into the system was a place where solvers are rather cooperative and are not competing for orders. They are simply acting as interfaces to fulfill certain runtimes that gets thrown into the engine for the states to get comprehended. And that's a unique model that I think is quite interesting, because we are not focused on efficiency now, because we are leaving the efficiency part to the applications, and applications will basically just do what they does best. And it's just interesting how we came to this conclusion, and we're excited to kind of like see how this part of the design philosophy kind of like expands, and how it gets adopted over time. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Nova. I said at the beginning that, Stripchain is making chain abstraction a reality. So maybe just be useful, just kind of explain in a simple way what chain abstraction is and how Stripchain achieves this.
Okay, perfect. So chain abstraction, yeah, it's a term that's been used a lot of times now in the industry. In general, I would say chain abstraction is essentially a technique, and you could achieve chain abstraction through multiple facets. One of basically the purpose of chain abstraction is to on the end user experiences, have the mechanism in place through which you could allow the end user to connect with any identity of any chain and use any assets on any chain to call a function, if that makes it simple. So it's basically about abstracting the identity system that is linked to the blockchain. So I would love to essentially use my Sui wallet to connect with the Solana application. That's what I'm talking about. Also, I would love to use my Sui assets to interact with the Solana application. And if I would somehow I'm able to achieve this construct, we will be able to, let's say that, or we will be able to say that, yes, we achieved chain abstraction in some sort of sense.
Got it. Thank you. All right. What guarantees does the Strip virtual machine provide when, for example, processing order flow?
That's a good question. Yeah. So Stripchain in general, whenever an order is or strip intent is rather thrown into it, so the first thing that it does is obviously it gets a commitment from StripIO to make sure that it is eligible to process that the strip intent is valid, and all the conditions will be satisfied. So it's the developer marks an execution trace, and the work or the job of StripVM is to make sure that, yes, it could get processed in the first place. And the second, the way it actually processes it is by throwing it into the general purpose solver network. And obviously, it coordinates with the solver network to ensure that the strip intent is processing over time and it's getting processed while continuously cooperating with StripIO. So one of the guarantees that, or one of the design spectrum that we sort of like subscribe to, was the idea of an optimistic design model where strip VM essentially enables a solver to work on a particular operation, because whenever you send a strip intent or an order, however you want to call it, into the machine, it splits the order based on which operation should go to what solver, and it parallelly processes the operation of coming from different applications, while the solver network or the solvers themselves would basically process it on a first in first out basis. So if while processing one of these requests, if StripVM notices that the strip IO is not able to essentially solve or respond, or sorry, strip the solver network as solver is not able to respond to a particular request, StripVM basically can slash the solver because it's not responding after, let's say, X number of blocks. So this guarantees that there will be a resulting output for one of these operations within this engine at the end of the day, and while it keeps on retrying. One of the main also guarantees that StripVM provides is that whenever an order comes into the system, while throughout the time that it takes to get that particular state processed across multiple spectrums, it provides data availability guarantees for all these outputs of all these sub orders, right? That keeps on getting processed over time throughout this general purpose solver network, and while all of them picks up their own traces of what they want to execute. So this provides like a secure like space for developers to interact with. So they are able to essentially build applications on top of Stripchain now, instead of essentially directly interacting with the and blockchain to kind of like create a stack flow. So yeah.
Yeah, got it. All right. Well, as we start to finish up this part of the podcast, Nova, just explain how Stripchain creates, I guess, that like that full stack environment, so developers can build that next generation of applications.
Yeah. So the first thing that the end goal that we want to reach is we want to create this new type of applications known as omnichannel applications that doesn't need to care about which chain or what kind of like blockchains a particular subcontract is based out of. It should provide like a chain abstracted, domain aware experience. And that's the model of design that we want to gravitate towards. And we came up with the idea of general intent passing instead of general message passing, where StripVM acts as the processor and the liquidity engine. We didn't get time to talk about that much, but StripVM also basically coordinates the liquidity across all the spectrum to ensure that the strip intent that gets, or the order that gets into the system, gets processed. The StripVM acts as the liquidity engine, the solver, general purpose solver network, to process and digress that information and work with the general identity system, which is the StripIO, providing the unified account for the user within the spectrum to complete a state change. And the main part of the developer tooling over here would be developers coming here in and building on using strip intents to define what they want across multiple spectrums. If they would want that, they would obviously can also directly subscribe to existing blockchain and use the common current architecture that we have. But this is also another use case that Stripchain essentially enables. So it allows a developer to completely rethink how they want to acquire users. It allows a user to create a lot more composite, I don't want to use this word complex, but let's say entertaining outcomes within their application, and just helps create a lot efficient consumer applications at the end of the day, simply by utilizing Stripchain and particularly StripVM to interact with other blockchains down in the space, not caring about which chain they have to build on in some sense. So yeah, that's how we are trying to enable a full stack like dependency, take care of the full stack dependencies to create this new type of applications in general.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Nova, look, for people listening that want to dig into Stripchain and what you and the team at Silent Research Labs are building, just to tell people what is the best place for them to do that. Where should they go?
So yeah, you can look up Stripchain. Stripchain is like StripChain on X, and you'll be able to essentially find a lot more information about us on there. We will open up a community space soon where developers and users could gather around and talk. And in the meantime, if you find us in your city, do come attend our roadshow as well. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think what we do now, Mr. Nova, is we finish off the podcast, and we're going to do that by running you through, the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. Are you up for it?
Yeah, for sure.
What I'm going to do, Nova, is I'm just going to run some questions at you, and I want you to give me kind of quick, snappy answers. You're a talker, so think about it, but quick, snappy answers, hot take style, if you like. Be interested to see what you have to say. Here is question 1 for you. Where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I'd be on the further right end of it.
Yes, I thought you'd say that. All right, well, what is your firmest conviction crypto opinion, Mr. Nova?
Can you run that question to me again?
Yes. What crypto opinion do you have that you have the most conviction in?
Yeah, we are definitely moving to a multi-chain world or a chain abstracted world where we will not care about how my application is built, and we will have a lot more seamless integration with whatever essentially assets or identities that we have into the space. Yeah,
I like it. All right. Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So, the omni-chain, multi-chain world of the future, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
In 10 years' time, I would say that every single application out there today, in 10 years' time, we will have found winners in certain spaces, like the Tesla of electric cars, and so on and so forth. And we will have rationalized the design space where we treat applications as microprocessors and how to essentially build on top of them and keep easing up on the user experience to keep tending to the consumers out there.
Yes, indeed. William Gibson famously said, Nova, that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
The future of, Bitcoin, right? It is still quite underappreciated, and I think it is definitely the future.
Yes, indeed. All right, brings us nicely to the final question, which is, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
Star Trek.
Yes, why?
I just love the characters and the logical redundancies and the way that the story progresses.
Yeah, I mean, Star Trek is a great answer. A lot of crossover between crypto people and Trekkies, actually. All right, Mr. Nova. Hey, it has been very fun talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show and spending some time with us. To close it out, again, just tell people once again where they should go to, keep up with what you guys are building with Stripchain.
Thank you so much, Andy, for having me, first of all. For anyone listening, you can go to our Twitter. You can search our username Stripchain. It's quite simple, and you'll be able to find us there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nova. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you so much, Andy. Bye-bye.
All right, there you go. That was Nova from Stripchain. Slightly more technical podcast today, wasn't it? So, I mean, sometimes it is good when you can get a guest who just wants to delve right into the technical details of what they're building. So, fantastic. Thank you so much, Nova. Thank you to the team at Silent Research Labs. Stripchain, fascinating. Interoperability protocol, making chain abstraction a reality. Fantastic to see. Hey, we reached the end of another show, folks. Thanks for listening. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin. Bye for now.